We are approaching spooky season.
Spooky season. This will be spooky season round 3, guys.
I'm excited. You all know how much we look forward to our spooky episodes.
Spooky.
And we're getting a really unique, I would say, episode for spooky season.
I forgot what we were doing, but yes.
Yeah,
Don't spoil it.
The thingy.
The
with
thing.
the ha ha ha. And the Big Apple. Big
I
Apple.
have no fucking clue what you're talking about. That's your hint.
But it's Stranger.
Oh, you're talking about a bonus episode, not our actual episode that we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. No.
I was very confused. I was like, who the hell are you covering? That's not who I thought you were covering.
No. But we have some really cool plans lined up for spooky season. So
now that I remember what they are.
Yeah, they're going to be fun. But my question is, as spooky season approaches, choose a rock star and choose a costume and choose a Halloween party location.
Okay. I've been wanting to be this for years, but I haven't had because there hasn't been a Halloween party in 2 Halloweens. I feel like I really want to dress up as I want to break free Freddie Mercury, where he dresses up as a lady with the vacuum.
Yeah.
So that, and then we're gonna have the party. I don't know. We can just have it at someone's house, but I want to wear that costume with the tank top, the pink dress outfit. I have bangs now. I can pull it off.
Yes. Okay. Here's what I want to do.
I need a mustache.
I've thought about this in my life. So it's a little raunchy, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Janis Joplin, I'm trying to remember if it was a cover for something, but she has this photo of her topless with these beads. Now, I'm not going to go topless.
It was a cover for something.
Yeah, it was a cover for something. I'm not going to go personally topless because that's a smidge out of the comfort zone. I'm not quite on the free the nipple train quite yet.
Fair.
But I'm going to get a breastplate like drag queens get, and it'll look like it.
There you go.
And then so it's literally coverage, covering, but I'm still in costume. And the party is going to be at Bethel Woods, where Woodstock actually happened.
That's going to be She Will Rock You 2023 Halloween.
Yeah.
We're going to rent out the Woodstock site and have
Dude, that would be fun.
We should. Dope.
We should do an episode sometime from there.
We should. We'll just camp.
We probably can pull some strings.
We'll just set up in the woods and just
just hide around the campus.
Yes. We'll vlog it or something weird. I don't know what we'll do. Anyway.
I'm Bethan.
And I'm Leah.
And this is She Will Rock You. Where are they getting a dub in a CBS executive meeting?
No. Bitch, don't touch my thermostat.
The ghost be like, hold up, before I haunt you, let me turn down the thermostat. Who is this band?
We're on page 1, guys. This is She Will Rock You. We should read a review because we did not read a review last week. And I know which review I want to read because we got a new one. Again.
Oh, yes.
Sorry that I'm skipping all over the queue of reviews.
I'm going to get some of this
I'm
diet
gonna apparently
Snapple.
have to go to our text thread because
while you're pulling that up, can I just lodge a complaint?
Sure.
The Snapple company. What the fuck happened? You got rid of your glass bottles. You got rid of the Happy Sun.
And the cap is a plastic twist cap.
Where's the fact? Where's the fun fact?
The point of drinking a Snapple.
Every Saturday in New York, growing up as a young buck, I'd get a bagel and I'd get a Snapple. Either had to be peach or raspberry. And I'd look forward to reading that Snapple fact. And now I just see a regular bottle like the other corporate America of teas.
Yeah, that's pretty boring.
Yeah. Anyway,
all right, I found it. We got a new review from our friend Thomas Carter Rochester of Lights, Thunder, Action. You may also know him as Thor if you follow him on social media.
You may also know him as the Jelly Bean voiceover guy.
Yes. So he said, for those about to rock, we stan this podcast. Leah and Bethan are hilarious individuals, and when you put them together, there's a fire that burns brightly, like a phoenix that hasn't died yet, because rock will never die. Nor will the chemistry between... I just realized you're supposed to be reading this because it's my week.
That's all right. Continue. You can have my slot.
Okay. Like a phoenix that hasn't died yet, because rock will never die. Nor will the chemistry between co-hosts as they dive into the history of my parents' life soundtrack. Shout out to the hippie parented millennials.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not listening to this podcast and are simultaneously reading this review, then grab some headphones, grab a beer, crank it up to 11, and let She Will Rock You podcast make rock love to your brain. And then it's a little mic drop.
I love Thomas. Thomas is like, we've made an amazing community of people, and Thomas has become like one of my favorite people in this community that we've been a part of.
And I met Thomas not even because of the show. I met because we both listened to Return to the Pod.
That's right.
Formerly known as another name that's now dead because they got sacked by the company they're working under. But if you like Star Wars, check out Return to the Pod.
Yeah, and definitely check out Lights, Thunder, Action.
Yes, if you like Marvel, check out Lights, Thunder, Action. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Marvel stuff getting ready to happen. So today we have the episode that our lovely listeners voted on. I did a little bracket. It got a little out of hand. We had the Wiggles in there for way too long.
I would like to thank the audience for downvoting the Wiggles. That was a close one. You motherfuckers made it way too close. Way too close.
They made it to like round 3 of 5. So I think they got slaughtered by, it might have been Tom Petty that finally knocked the Wiggles down. But we're talking about Tom Petty because he won by a landslide. And the runner-up of that poll may make an appearance very soon. No one probably knows what that is anymore, so surprise when we get there. But I couldn't let that person slide either. But today, talking about Tom Petty, who I have to say, going into this, was someone I did not know much about.
Yeah, I only know a song he did with Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, I knew that he and Stevie were not lovers, but really good friends.
Right.
And I knew that he did Wildflowers. And I knew he did Don't Back Down, which is in that Nickelodeon Barnyard movie. And that was kind of all I knew. So let's talk about Tom Petty. Tom Petty was born on October 20th, 1950 in Gainesville, Florida. We got our first Floridian.
Is this really the first time we've talked about Florida men?
I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
I can't think of anyone off the top of my head.
No.
Most rock stars are not from Florida.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah. He got out of Florida really fast. We will see. He's the oldest son, or the first of 2 sons, to Kitty Petty, which is not a good name. Sorry, Kitty. Who worked in the local tax office, and Earl Petty, who was a traveling salesman. He had a younger brother named Bruce, who was 7 years younger. My little brother's 7 years younger, so we have that in common. And Tom was a very rebellious child. I watched the VH1 Behind the Music special, and his dad tells a story about how when Tom was 4 years old, he found a quarter, and he wanted to go down to spend it, but his dad told him he was too young to go alone because he was 4, and he needed to wait till his mom got home. So little itty-bitty Tom just puts the quarter in his pocket and starts walking towards town, which got him a spanking, but his dad said also set the way for how he lived his life. He just did what he wanted.
Damn.
According to Tom, his father found it very difficult to accept that he was a mild-mannered kid who was interested in the arts and not sports, and regularly subjected him to both verbal and physical abuse on a regular basis. So, rock star checkbox of shitty dad checked. But he was always really close to his mother and to Bruce. He started getting interested in rock and roll music at the age of 10 when he met who else but Elvis Presley.
I'll do it.
So in that summer of 1961, when he was 10, he lived near Ocala, Florida, which at the time was a really big filming location.
Yeah.
And his uncle actually worked on the set of the Elvis Presley film Follow That Dream. And he just brought his nephew to work one day, and he instantly became obsessed with Elvis Presley. He went back home after this trip with his uncle.
This is a Forrest Gump story.
It kind of is.
Continue.
Because he goes back home after this trip to Ocala and trades his beloved Whammo slingshot to someone. I don't know who, but he gets a box of Elvis Presley singles, and the rest of his course of his life was set.
Wow.
So he sacrificed his slingshot. In a 2006 interview, Tom Petty said that he knew he wanted to be in a band the minute he saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. So this is your classic rock star origin story.
Like what movies have been based off of.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm not sure we're not citing Forrest Gump at this point.
Yeah.
He said, the minute that I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and it's true of thousands of guys, this was my way out. This was the way to do it. You get your friends and you're a self-contained unit and you make the music. And it looked like so much fun, and it was something that I identified with. I'd never been that hugely into sports. I've been a big fan of Elvis, but I saw in the Beatles that there was something that I could do. I knew I could do it. And it wasn't long before there were groups springing up in garages all over the place. Tom's dad bought him his first guitar for a whole $28.
Wow. That's a deal.
It's a steal. He did not steal it, though, unlike some other people we've talked about. And he immediately became obsessed, and in this interview with his dad was like, he had that thing attached to him for like years, days, nights, wherever he went. He'd just eat, sleep, and play guitar. And then in 9th grade, he starts his very first band, as all 9th grade boys do. They're called the Sundowners. Not the worst name.
Not the worst.
Very Floridian. They only last for 2 years. But they get him into a little bit of trouble because he's so obsessed with being in a band that in a year of school, he misses 42 days.
What was he doing?
He was skipping to go rehearse and play.
But like, that means the other guy skipped 42 days.
I don't know if they were with him. I don't know if he just...
So he just did it for fun?
He just really was obsessed with playing guitar.
Why didn't he just like bring it to school and like play in a practice room like the rest of us?
I don't know. Somehow he did manage to graduate high school.
That's impressive.
I don't know how.
That's super impressive.
But clearly he did not go to college because he had other dreams. Somewhere around this time, I'm not specifically sure if he was in college or freshly out of college, he starts a band known as the Epics.
Okay.
Which later evolved into Mudcrutch.
Wrong direction, but
I don't like it.
Yeah.
They named Mudcrutch after the farm where 2 of the band members lived, Mudcrutch Farm.
That's a terrible name for a farm.
It's a terrible name for a farm. It's a terrible name for a band that's in the Americana rock scene.
Yeah.
It's very much a like metal band name. It's not a...
Why? Because mud?
Because mud.
Yeah.
Mudcrutch.
I see how you feel about my people.
They have a band called Puddle of Mud, okay?
That's not metal. The fuck's wrong with you? We don't claim them. That's butt rock.
Anyway, so the band would eventually become the Heartbreakers, and included future Heartbreakers members Mike Campbell and a guy named Ben Mott Tench, which he has the worst name ever. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ben Mott. And they were popular in Gainesville, but that was about it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot happening in Florida for the music scene. They all lived and rehearsed in this literal shack on the edge of town that had a field around it. It was Mudcrutch Farm. Mm-hmm. In 1971, they held the first ever Mudcrutch Farm Festival that got them shut down by the cops and then evicted from the property.
Why do I just see like as if it was raining and it's just muddy and people are just like sliding in the mud? Like we're talking Woodstock style.
It's Florida, so it's probably how it happened. They were really loud. It just didn't go over well.
Yeah.
And so they stayed around Gainesville for a couple more years, but by 1974, they're like, okay, we got to get out of Florida. They sent demo tapes to LA. Mm-hmm. They got some interest. And so they were like, all right, let's move to LA. And so they pack everyone up in a van and they go to LA to entertain these offers. And once in LA, they sign with Shelter Records. And in the first recording session for this record deal that they've gotten, they very quickly learned that just because they could play it live did not mean they could make a record.
Two different things.
Two very different things. And the label didn't like the other guys writing. They only wanted to record the songs that Tom wrote, mm-hmm. which of course the rest of the band didn't like so much.
Right.
So they end up releasing a single, Depot Street. And by the time this comes out, the band has broken up. Mudcrutch is no more. So Tom says, fine, I don't want to like move back to Florida. I want to stay in LA. So he starts to make a solo record, and he uses session players. He didn't love it. Like he wanted to be in a band since he saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Like he's a band guy. So while he's, figuring his life out, he ends up getting married to a woman named Jane Benyo in 1974. They do later get divorced in 1996. But Jane is important because she's his wife, but also because when Jane once met Stevie Nicks at a party, she said that she met Tom at the age of 17, but with her little North Florida accent, Stevie heard Edge of 17 and then wrote a hit song about it.
Really?
Yes.
She's the inspiration behind Edge of 17.
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yes. This episode is not really the time or place to go into the Stevie-Tom relationship because that's a whole episode in itself. But they were really good friends for over 40 years before he died.
Yeah.
And they worked together closely pretty much his entire life. So that's all I'll say about that because there's a lot of other stuff to talk about. So now Tom is married. They're living in LA. He's figuring out what he wants to do with his life. And he decides, let's make a new band. And they make Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He brings back Mike Campbell, and Mike Campbell plays lead guitar, and Ben Montench on keys from Mudcrutch. But they also add Ron Blair on bass and Stan Lynch on drums. And they release a self-titled debut album, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
It's a great name.
Yeah. I don't know why they named it the Heartbreakers. I didn't put that in here for some reason. Normally
Just a good name.
And it did okay in the US, but it did way better in Britain.
Because they have class.
I don't know.
They have taste.
Britain does not recognize their own talent, as we have discussed.
That is true.
You always make it in the country you're not from. It's the moral of this
Hence
podcast.
our podcast. Hello, UK.
Yeah, we have more
and
listeners.
Egypt and Venezuela and Canada.
And Sweden. Hello,
and
Sweden. We get a lot of you from Sweden. So from the start, the group had like a different sound than a lot of bands at the time. They took this influence from the 50s and 60s rockers that they loved, like the Elvises and the Beatles, and they wrapped them up in these like 3-minute, really well-written nuggets. I don't know where I got that sentence from, but I wrote it in here.
It's a well-articulated sentence, Leah.
Their early singles included Breakdown and a song that I guarantee you everyone listening knows, American Girl. But it would be 2 more years before they hit it the big time. They did so bad after this album came out that at one point, Ben Montench calls his local radio station, wherever he's living at the time, and asks them to play something by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And they told him, we don't play that shit here.
Holy shit. Oh my God. That is like a straight arrow to the ego.
He tells that story in the VH1 special, and you can tell he just was like, he's still not over it.
Yeah. It's all right. His time will come.
They will get famous, obviously, or we would not be talking about them. So in the late summer of 1977, their song Anything That's Rock and Roll charted in the UK. And so this was their chance to get some momentum going because it's clearly not happening over here. So they go to the UK and open for a guy named Niels Lafkin. And when they get back to the US, they're working really hard to get their momentum up. And they get a gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Oh, nice.
Opening up for this new band called Blondie.
Oh.
You might have heard of them. And that gig got them attention of a U.S. record buyer, and they end up getting their first top 40 single with Breakdown in 1978. So then we get into our favorite topic on this show, record label legal drama.
Woo! I live for the legals.
There's a lot of legal drama with Tom Petty, and I cut some of it out, but it's important to understand where and how Tom was being treated by his record label to understand Tom. So in 1978, he's still signed with Shelter Records, which he signed that original deal with Mudcrutch. They kept him. Shelter gets acquired by ABC Records. And this really worries Tom because Shelter had kind of just like let them do what they want. They weren't very controlling. And he was really worried about losing the autonomy that he had for the last, at least I think it's been like 4 years at this point. Mm-hmm. So he renegotiates his contract with ABC to ensure that things are going to be the same. The band's still going to get support. And they finish these negotiations and ABC turns around and sells the whole company to MCA Records. Like
that's a dick move.
It's a really dick move.
Like, why would you? That pisses me off. Like, they had to have known they were in the process of it.
It pissed Tom off too because he felt like he was being treated like a piece of meat. So he sued them. But his legal team was like, this is not worth our fight. Let's just go get a new record label. So they do some, I don't even know. They do some legal stuff. They get out of the deal that they made back when they were Mudcrutch because they just been like renewing it. But under the royalty rate that they were being paid, they could never pay back the amount of money that they had been fronted with Shelter Records. So they would forever be in debt. So the band has to declare bankruptcy.
Ooh. Get
things rearranged so that they can get out of their contract. Which was a really shitty thing for them at the time.
Yeah.
But really shook things up in the industry and allowed a lot of artists to get out of their bad contracts.
Right.
Around the same time. So good for them. The ultimate irony is that they end up staying with MCA in the end.
Because did they do the bankruptcy?
Yeah, they do the bankruptcy.
Option?
They have to do the bankruptcy. Wow. They declare bankruptcy. They're looking for a new deal, and they end up staying with MCA because they meet a new, younger record rep who was able to get Tom and the band the royalty payout and the autonomy that they wanted. So they kind of just like treated it. It was a lesson in all legal parties involved.
Right.
A lesson for the record label. Water under the bridge. They go make a new album. It is not the last of the legal drama that we will encounter with this group. In 1978, they released their third album. This is still when they're Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It's called Damn the Torpedoes. And this album did really, really well. It very, very quickly went platinum, which is a big turnaround from not being played on the radio.
Yeah.
The singles off this album were Don't Do Me Like That, which hit number 10 in the US, which was their first top 10 single, and Refugee, which hit 15 in the US. And this is their breakout album. So what happens after that? There's pressure to do it again from the record label that's already fucked them over once. And so they start working on their next album, which is Hard Promises, and the band starts fighting. Specifically between Tom and drummer Stan Lynch. And for visualization purposes, I want you to picture Uncle Joey from Full House.
Okay.
That's Stan. Because they kind of look alike and they have the same personality.
This is a great analogy.
It's very accurate. Stan describes himself as being the asshole of the band and being the clown. Like he would just goof off just for the attention.
Cut it out.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. You can tell that when they did this interview, he had grown up a lot, but he's looking back and he's like, yeah, Tom had every reason to hate me back in the day because I was a dick. So
at least he acknowledges it.
Yeah, he acknowledges it. He knows that he would pick fights just to pick fights when he could have just, agreed and moved on.
Yeah.
He ends up getting fired for a few days during this recording process, but they did welcome him back. They finished the album. And they run into record trouble again when they're getting ready to release Hard Promises. The label wants to release the album at the list price of $9.98, which at the time was called Superstar pricing. Mm-hmm. It was a whole $1 more than the usual price of $8.98. And Tom didn't like this because he didn't want to charge his fans more money.
Yeah.
There was literally no reason to make it $9.98. They didn't necessarily need the money. And he didn't want it to become an issue with his fans. So they were like, fine, you don't get the album if we can't get the price that we want.
What? Like the royalties?
No, Tom is going to withhold the album from the record label.
Oh, I see. Okay.
He said you can either not have the album or we're going to call the album $8.98.
What a move.
I love
That
it.
is a chess move. You have just moved the Rourke into the right position.
They don't call him Tom Petty for nothing. He did win that battle. MCA said, fine, we'll sell it at $8.98. And they end up releasing it with the original name of Hard Promises.
But now I want it to be $8.98.
$8.98. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
And he says in an interview that I watched, he may have won the battle, but he did not win the war because the record label made him pay for that stunt for a very long time.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
He did not get treated well. The album did do really well, though. It was a top 10 hit. It went platinum. It had a hit single called The Waiting. It also includes the duet Insider with Stevie Nicks.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1982, Ron Blair, the bassist, he just leaves. One day he just says, band life is too much for me.
And just pieces out?
Bye. Yep.
What do you go do?
He just retired.
Oh, okay.
It kind of shocked the band. They weren't expecting that he was going to leave. And they have just kind of scramble to find a replacement. They replace him with a guy named Howie Epstein that fall and start recording their fifth album, which is called Long After Dark in 1982. And once again, Stan gets fired for a few days. He says,
what a trend.
He says, there's two things you can do to get fired from a band, sucking or having a bad attitude. And I probably did both. I really like Stan.
We stand Stan.
We stand Stan. After Long After Dark is released, it's a lot of afters, they toured for 18 months straight.
Jeez, that's a long time.
And then immediately went right into Tom's home studio to start working on the next album.
That's a long
a long
there's
time.
There's no rest in that.
Being together. I mean, we already know that Stan and Tom aren't getting along.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be together.
Yes.
And then they go right into his house.
Like a hiatus would have been nice. Even a month.
Probably.
Would have cooled the temperature down a little bit.
Probably. And they go into this session with the idea of drawing inspiration from their southern roots and life in Florida. Now there's an issue because these sessions are just happening in Tom's house. There is no producer overseeing them, which means that these sessions turn into one long 2-year party.
Of course it does. That's gonna make the record label happy.
But you know what else enters the picture? Drugs.
Yeah.
Cause
Miss Cocaine.
Because we're there. And the record label and people involved at the time got really concerned that the album was not going to happen because the drugs got so bad. They say in the interviews that they managed to keep Hollywood out of their lives until this point, but Tom met some really bad people and got into a really bad place, and it came close to just everything blowing up in their faces. At one point, Tom got so frustrated during the mixing process that he punched a wall and broke his left hand.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, which when your life is playing guitar.
He was a Kyle before Kyles were Kylan.
Yeah. It took surgeons rebuilding his hand with wire and studs.
Holy cow.
And 9 months of physical therapy to be able to play guitar properly again.
He punched it that hard?
Yes. Yes.
That's insane.
But don't worry. Things get relatively back to normal because in 1985, the band partakes in Live Aid, the Philadelphia one, not the London one. They play 4 songs at the Philadelphia leg, and later that year they release Southern Accents, which is probably the band's best known album, at least if you grew up in Virginia like I did. This includes Don't Come Around Here No More, which was produced by Dave Stewart. I don't know why I put that in there. It's not important. And the song's video is really fucking weird. Really fucking weird. It features Tom Petty dressed as the Mad Hatter, and he's chasing Alice from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And then in one scene, he cuts her and eats her like she's a cake.
Ew.
So really, it was the TikTok trend of, is this cake, before TikTok existed.
Well, you did say he was on cocaine, so...
Cocaine was definitely involved in the planning of this video.
I don't like that though. That bothers me.
The video makes me really uncomfortable and I don't like it.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't watch it.
I'd rather watch the Aerosmith Pink video than watch this video.
Yeah.
And that says something. So what do they do after they release this? They got to tour again, but they end up touring with Bob Dylan.
Ooh.
Which he's going to be a key player in a minute. The tour led to the live album Pack Up the Plantation Live. And then they joined Bob Dylan on his True Confessions tour. And they also played some dates with the Grateful Dead in 1986 and 1987.
Nice.
There's a lot of collaboration happening in this space. In 1987, because Tom loves legal drama, this isn't really drama, but he sued tire company BF Goodrich for $1 million because they were using a jingle in a commercial that was really similar to his song Mary's New Car. The ad agency said that they had sought permission to use Tom's song, but Tom said no, and so they just like wrote a really similar song.
Yeah. Who won that?
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. That's not a good idea.
And so the judge ruled in Tom Petty's favor, issued a restraining order prohibiting the ad from playing anymore, and they settled out of court. But it made a pretty big statement on artistic control and freedom, and we'll see some more instances of this happening in a little bit. So they released Let Me Up, I've Had Enough in 1987, which was between tours with Bob Dylan, because they're now bros with Bob Dylan. And then Tom is in the news for something kind of crazy. It is crazy. His home just fucking catches on fire while him, his wife, his kids, and his housekeeper are in it. Like,
oh, jeez.
It was a very traumatizing experience.
I bet.
They were just chilling and a fire alarm goes off and they have to rush outside. The housekeeper got burns on her head and arms, but the family got out unharmed. But this is a massive fire. It took 10 fire companies and 40 firefighters an hour to put out the blaze.
Holy cow.
Because it was just burning so hot and fast. Amazingly, like the whole house was a smoking ruin, but the basement recording studio was unharmed.
That's fantastic.
So like
that's a lot of money to replace that.
Yes. And so like your house catching on fire wasn't traumatizing enough. Investigators learned that it was an arson. Like someone walked into his stairwell, doused the back staircase with a flammable liquid.
Are you kidding?
No. To this day, like when I was pulling this together last week, I was looking for new information. The case is still unsolved.
So, okay. So someone just waltzed into his house.
Yes.
With no one knowing.
Nope.
And starts a fire and walks out.
Yep.
Like, do you not keep your doors locked?
This is the 70s. No.
Why?
Because it's the 70s. This is why there's a serial killer problem in California.
This is why you all, like, were people just that trusting in the 70s? That, like, I will be totally fine. Also, nothing bad is going to ever happen to me.
To be as big of a celebrity as he was and not have, like, a security team.
Well, that's the thing. I was like, where's AT&T or whatever it's called? ADT. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, it's
bodyguard.
Yeah. What is it? 1980s? What?
This is 87.
Yeah. So 87, like, surely some security system has to be out by then.
Apparently not. Well, but yeah, I had no clue that his house caught on fire like that. It's crazy. Especially
because someone just waltzed in and was like, you know, I'm going to set Tom Petty's house on fire today.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Some crazy fan, I'm sure. Yeah. Or maybe an anti-fan. I don't know. But because Tom Petty has no chill, he goes on tour 2 days later, homeless, with no possessions. But he did say that being on tour was really therapeutic because otherwise he would have had no structure in his life. Yeah. And like touring was something that he knew and could do and felt productive. So traumatizing life experience. Mm-hmm. So on this tour, after his house fire, he meets our friend Jeff Lynne. That Jeff Lynne of ELO.
Oh.
Which if you have not listened to that episode after this one, go back and listen because Jeff Lynne is a fascinating person.
He is.
He is also going to be important. So pin him for a second. Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty wrote Free Fallin' together, which I did not know.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that was a Tom Petty song until now. I thought it was you too.
Great. Someone just turned this show off.
I'm sorry. Listen, I got blind spots in my rock history. What can I say?
I'm kidding. And once they wrote that song, Tom released his first solo album after a decade of being with the Heartbreakers, which the band was not super thrilled about.
Well, it's kind of like you're already Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It's not like the Heartbreakers and Tom Petty going solo. You're really just like axing half of your name.
A good point, but the band wasn't thrilled with it. So on top of being in the Heartbreakers, or Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and his solo career, he also gets another project going without the Heartbreakers, which the time has come, folks. We're talking about our first supergroup.
Ooh.
So in 1988, Tom Petty joins George Harrison's supergroup, the Traveling Wilburys, which also includes Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, and Jeff Lynne.
That's a good lineup.
It's a damn good lineup. This had been a pet project, or like a dream project of George Harrison for a while. He first mentioned the Traveling Wilburys publicly during a radio interview in February 1988. He had just released his Cloud 9 album, and they asked, like, well, what are you going to do now? And he said, what I'd really like to do next is do an album with me and some of my mates. It's this new group I got in mind. It's called the Traveling Wilburys. I'd like to do an album with them, and then later we can just go and do our own albums again. Mm-hmm. So it was supposed to be like a temporary project. And he worked with, there's a lot of he's. George Harrison worked with Jeff Lynne on Cloud 9, so they became pretty good friends. Mm-hmm. And George Harrison was like, let's start the band with the two of us. Like, we work together really well. Let's do that. And so they started chatting like, well, who else do we want to add? And so George Harrison picks Bob Dylan. Jeff Lynne was like, let's get Roy Orbison. And then when Tom was touring and he met Jeff Lynne, they were like, that's it. That's the fifth piece of the puzzle. They all bonded over all five of them have like a mutual love of 50s rock and roll.
Yeah. And
so the group was born. And the term Wilbury, because I wanted to know, I did write why they were called the Traveling Wilburys. This term came about during the recording sessions for the Cloud 9 album. They are referring to recording errors created by faulty equipment. And George Harrison would joke to Jeff Lynne, we'll bury him in the mix. We'll bury.
I love that.
Yeah, so then they would use the term for any kind of small error. And George Harrison said, well, let's be the Trembling Wilburys. And they were like, nah, that's not great. So they changed to the Traveling Wilburys.
I love that. And I also like want to see this lineup. Like, I know we're not going to, but I want to see this lineup.
There is a really good, very short documentary that I watched about it. And just watching them, I don't know if I talk about this in my outline or not, watching them work together.
Yeah.
It's like magic.
I
five
bet.
Of them being in
because
one
they're
room.
All different music.
They're all different, but they're all fucking
different.
geniuses.
Yeah.
In their own right. So they're having Jeff Lynne and Roy Orbison are having dinner, and George Harrison asked Jeff to help him record a track, and Roy Orbison's just there, and so they were like, let's just do it while we're here. We're having dinner. So the three of them go into Bob Dylan's garage studio, because I guess they're having dinner at Bob Dylan's house, and they had no, like, they can't just call up a studio because it's dinner time. And they just start like piddling around and working on things. And they end up birthing the song Handle with Care, which was literally named after the label on a box in Bob Dylan's garage.
I love it.
Which is adorable.
I love it.
And so George Harrison takes this like makeshift recording of the five of them to Warner Brothers executives, and he's like, well, let's just throw it on a B-side for something that he was releasing. And the executives were like, no, this is not a B-side track. Like, you got to make an album out of this. And so Jeff Lynne and George Harrison are like, well, maybe this Wilbury band can happen. Like, let's play with it. I liked this quote from George Harrison that said, "The thing about the Wilburys for me is if we tried to plan it, or if anyone had said, let's form a band and get these people in it, it would never happen. It's impossible. It just happened completely just by magic, just by circumstance. Maybe there was a full moon or something like that. It was just a quite magical little thing, really." So just so you people at home can keep tabs, 2 of the 5 are British, 3 are American, and they're all fanboys of each other, which is the most adorable thing to watch.
This is The Millionaires.
Yes.
Is exactly what it is.
It's adorable.
Yeah, it's so great.
And they're all 5 musical geniuses, as I said. So they make a full album together, creatively titled Traveling Wilburys Volume 1. And some genius filmed the whole process, bless them, that was later edited into a promotional film called Whatever Wilbury.
I love that.
They recorded that first album in 10 days.
Wow.
In May of 1988, because Bob Dylan was getting ready to peace out and go on tour again. So like it was now or never.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I watched a little documentary on the creation of this album, and they work so well together, and they had this kind of like dream setting, once in a lifetime opportunity to make an album together. And the way that they wrote it was really cool. The 5 band members would literally sit in a circle with their guitars in the kitchen and just like pick out a basic track that they wanted to work with from each other's brains. And they would write and record right there at the kitchen table.
Wow.
And then they would record vocals in another room after dinner each night. So they'd get the backing tracks and then do the vocal layovers. So on one of the very first days of recording, Tom Petty said, because he was a really big fan of Bob Dylan, and they had spent some time together on tour, and he was fine working with him, but George Harrison felt the need to like tell Bob Dylan, we know that you're Bob Dylan and everything, but we're going to treat you and just talk to you like we would everyone else. And Bob Dylan replies, well, great. Believe it or not, I'm in awe of you guys. So it's the same for me.
I love that.
Like I said, they're all fanboys of each other. This album comes out on October 18th, 1988, and it was a critical and commercial success. It revitalized the careers of Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, and Tom Petty. And as George Harrison had intended when he wanted to make this group, it kind of like broke what was currently happening in the scene.
Yeah.
It's 1988, so like hip hop, synth pop, and acid house music are starting to make a come up. Yeah. And then you get this like beautiful acoustic mastermind.
It's like almost Crosby, Stills and Nash is what I'm kind of taking from it. I don't know if that's what it sounds like, but
one of the reviewers at the time wrote in a review that the release of this album was like a Viking longship docking in a hovercraft terminal.
That's a great line.
I love it because it was just it was not a 1988 sounding album. It had 2 successful singles, achieved triple platinum certification, and was nominated for several awards and won the 1990 Grammy for Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group. So while all this was happening, because no one sleeps in the 80s, as we've just determined.
Well, why would you when you have cocaine?
Yeah. But really, though, Tom is releasing the album that he wrote with Jeff Lynne, because they're off doing their own thing, too. And
that's a lot of side projects.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I remember when we did the Yellow episode, that Jeff Lynne stayed very, very busy all the time. So this is part of that. That album was called Full Moon Fever, came out in 1989. And if the Traveling Wilburys were hot, Tom was hotter because he hit number 3 on the summer charts with that album, which was the highest that he or the Heartbreakers had ever achieved. And when he tours this album, he tours it with the Heartbreakers, which is kind of weird, kind of pisses the band off because they weren't involved in the creation of this album. The only heartbreaker who was involved was Mike Campbell, who played guitar on the album. All the rest was session musicians or other friends of Tom.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like a weird dynamic. After that tour, Tom starts really digging working with Jeff Lynne. And so he's like, hey, Jeff, come work on the Heartbreakers album with us. But the band relationship is not in a great spot because they've been fighting for years. They're not pleased that Tom's doing his own thing over here. Mm-hmm. And so tensions are high. And while they're working on this next Heartbreakers album, Tom starts working on his next solo project simultaneously, which is Wildflowers. Mm-hmm. And he does bring the band in to help from time to time. Everyone in the band gets a role in the finished product, except Stan.
Stan, you did it to yourself, man.
So, unsurprisingly, Stan leaves the band because everything comes to a boiling point around this.
Yeah.
Wildflowers gets released in 1994, and I had a section written about this, but then I was like, I can do better than just me telling you about Wildflowers. So I'm going to pass it over to my friend Brian Colburn from Playlist Wars, and he's going to give us some insight about Wildflowers because he's infinitely more knowledgeable about Tom Petty than I am. I was one when this album came out, so I can't tell you about it. So cut to Brian.
Wildflowers by Tom Petty, for a lack of a better word, is his absolute masterpiece. This is the album that truly defines who Tom Petty was as an artist and takes all the music that has been put out over the course of his career and sums it up into one perfect statement. The album spawned 4 singles: You Don't Know How It Feels, You Wreck Me, It's Good to Be King, and A Higher Place. All 4 of them are fantastic songs, but there is so much more that this album has to offer. Any one of the 15 original tracks could have very easily been a single, and probably should have been. In the case of songs like Honeybee, Crawling Back to You, Cabin Down Below, there's just no shortage of fantastic music on this album. Let's just say there's so much fantastic music on this album that it was originally intended to be a double album, and the label gave Tom Petty a hard time about it, which just shows how much labels know, because in 2020 they re-released the album as Wildflowers and All the Rest, and the 10 songs that were left off of Wildflowers could have very easily been put out as a double album in the 90s to much success. Songs like Somewhere Under Heaven, Climb That Hill, Something Could Happen, Leave Virginia Alone. All these songs could have very easily been on rock radio in the 90s. So I feel like that was a mistake on the part of the label, which was remedied somewhat on the Songs and Music from She's the One soundtrack, because some of the cuts that were supposed to be on Wildflowers made it onto this. But I really wish they would have been where they belonged, which was Wildflowers. I feel, yes, the album was ambitious from Tom Petty to do a double album, but he did it and did it right. Working with Rick Rubin brought out the best in what Tom Petty can do alone, as well as what he does with the Heartbreakers, who are all the session players on this album, minus Stan Lynch, who did not play on the album. Instead, we have Steve Ferrone, who started playing live with the band the following year. Here's where he made his studio debut. Now to kind of highlight a couple of the songs. Tom Petty's no stranger to opening up an album with a slower song. He used Free Fallin' to open up Full Moon Fever, and here he uses Wildflowers, a stripped-back, beautiful acoustic number to open up this album. And it might give people pause because they might think they're going to be in for a snoozer of an album. But that's not the case at all, because you have songs like You Wreck Me and Honeybee that are just up there with some of the more rockin' tunes that he's ever done. You Don't Know How It Feels encapsulates that classic Tom Petty vibe. It just speaks to the masses. This was the first song released after Mary Jane's Last Dance, which was the massive hit he had from his Greatest Hits compilation. So this is the kind of song that it does have a little bit of that 90s feel, but make no mistake, there's still the classic Tom Petty element to this song, and it works really well, and I think it was the perfect first single to put out from this album, because the album does incorporate rock, acoustic, country, Americana, and this song has a little bit of all of that mixed in. As far as songs like You Wreck Me, I mean, come on, this song just kicks all sorts of ass. This song rocks. When a song is covered by Taking Back Sunday and they can't really make it any heavier, that just goes to show how much the Heartbreakers amped up for Tom on this song. And then you have songs like It's Good to Be King. When he plays that live, the song on the album is just over 5 minutes long, but when he plays it live, it stretches out to 10, sometimes 15 minutes, but it doesn't feel like a meandering jam. This song just grabs your attention and holds on to it for that entire period of time. Honeybee is a down and dirty rocker. This is actually one that when we did a Playlist Wars Tom Petty battle, I included as my representation from Wildflowers, because this song really, as much as You Wreck Me rocks, Honeybee is the perfect example of 90s alternative hard rock with Tom Petty, and it works so well. Now, the Foo Fighters have covered this song, and once again, they did not bring the heft that the Heartbreakers brought out for Tom Petty on this song. And that just goes to show that sometimes you can't mess with perfection, and a lot of the songs on this album are simply perfect. I truly wish that Tom was still alive today so we could have seen the Wildflowers All the Rest tour that was discussed about when he was talking about this album being re-released in its original form. However, unfortunately, that will never come to fruition. But if you do not have Tom Petty's Wildflowers and All the Rest, I highly suggest you give that version a listen first, because that's the way he and Rick Rubin originally intended the album to be. And I just feel like when you listen to it in that light, it gives you a whole new respect for the amount of amazing music these guys were able to accomplish in one session. It's truly a masterpiece of an album. Anytime someone says, where do I start with Tom Petty? I always go with Wildflowers. It is an absolute perfect start if you're looking to introduce yourself to the world of Tom Petty outside of the radio hits. This is where you should start. But make no mistake, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Tom Petty solo, there's not a bad album to be had. But this one just rises to the top.
That's really good insight. So one thing that was going through my head when I was thinking about it, so Tom Petty's in his 40s when this comes out. Because it's 1994?
1994, and he's born in 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's in his 40s when this is coming out. His greatest, like, one of his most regarded albums.
Yeah.
That's really, like, it's just always cool to see when artists, because a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people in the music industry and the record labels make this very huge mistake. And that if you're not in your 20s, more importantly, anywhere from the age of 20 to 25, like,
yes,
it's this 5-year window, right? Like, you're going to have it all fucking figured out with a bag of chips in 5 years. Let me tell you something. That doesn't happen. Very seldom.
We're still stupid.
Yeah, correct. We haven't figured it all out.
No.
But, you know, it's just like, if you don't, like, figure it out by then and have that successful career in those days, and then, like, you know, 25 to 35, you're touring your greatest hits, right? And then that's it.
Yeah.
And then you just do that till you die. And it's just like the idea that, like, you know, we can make great music in our 40s. It's still,
you're
like,
in your prime when you're in your 40s.
You're in your prime, exactly.
You've got some life experience and you're under your belt.
Right.
You fucked up a couple times. You've done some drugs. You've
Right.
learned the bad lessons. Now you're just vibing.
I just wish we would just realize that there's really good music past that window.
Yep.
You know?
Again, record labels don't know anything.
No.
They really don't. But yeah, when I think Tom Petty, I think of Wildflowers. So
Right.
Thank you, Brian, for that insight, because that's way better than I would have said about it. The only thing that I'll add to what Brian said is, because we usually throw this in there when we get to them, that in 2020, this album was ranked at number 2014 number 214 on the Rolling Stones Greatest Albums of All Time list, which is honestly lower than I expected it to be ranked.
Yeah.
But it's there. So remember how Tom Petty likes to sue people from using his music
Right.
that he doesn't agree with? 2000, during the 2000 presidential campaign, he sued George W. Bush for using I Won't Back Down during his campaign. And after his death, his family did the same thing to Donald Trump in 2020.
I love it.
Because Tom would have never stood for a song of his being used in a campaign of hate.
That's what you got to do.
So good for Tom. In 2006, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers headlined the 5th annual Bonnaroo Music Festival, which I didn't realize that Bonnaroo was that old.
Same.
But it is. And part of that Bonnaroo was part of their 30th anniversary tour, and it included special guests Stevie Nicks, Pearl Jam, the Allman Brothers Band, and the Black Crowes.
That's a good lineup.
If you were at Bonnaroo, there's probably no point ever going to a show again if that was what you saw.
Yeah.
On February 3rd, 2008, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers performed during the halftime show of Super Bowl 42, which was the Giants versus the Patriots.
I remember that.
Considered to be one of the best Super Bowls of all time.
I was very stressed out during that game as a Giants fan.
The Giants won.
Yeah, I know. In the last 2 minutes, I remember it was like the Patriots were ready to win in the last 2 minutes. I don't know what happened to Eli, but he finally woke up and he goes, pa, pa, pa.
Any game the Patriots win is a good game. So,
yeah.
I mean, Patriots lose is a good game. I hate the
you.
Patriots. Let me go on record and say that. And I have to say, we've talked about several Super Bowl shows now. Mm-hmm. They've all been terrible. But this and the Rolling Stones are my favorite so far. And petition to bring back rock and roll to the Super Bowl halftime show.
That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Because we're missing that. So unfortunately, Tom Petty did pass away in 2017. He was found unconscious in his house, not breathing, and in cardiac arrest.
I thought he died in 2020.
2017.
What? Really?
I thought he died in 2022.
No. No. Because I posted about it.
No, it's
on my Insta.
October 20. That was Van Halen. You're thinking of Eddie Van Halen. Yes.
No, I'm not.
He died in 2017.
Swear to you, I remember posting Tom Petty dying, and I was like, man, what a legend.
Nope, he died in 2017.
No.
Yes.
I don't
Time is a construct.
What glitch in the Matrix has this done to me?
It was 2017. He was only 66 years old. A memorial service was held on October 16th, 2017, which was 4 days before what would have been his 67th birthday. They didn't know what caused it for a while. Mm-hmm. They didn't have confirmation until January 19th, 2018. So he died in October. No confirmation. The LA County medical examiner determined that Tom had died from accidental mixed drug toxicity.
Ugh.
So Tom had been experiencing a number of medical problems right before his death, including emphysema, knee difficulties, and a fractured hip that he was prescribed pain medication for. And he had been informed on the day of his death that his hip injury had actually worsened and he was going to need surgery. And he, on September 28th, 2018, so almost a whole year after his death, his widow Dana gave an interview to Billboard saying that Tom had been putting off his hip surgery for a very long time. She said that he'd had it in his mind that this was going to be his last tour, and he owed it to his longtime crew from decades. Some of the crew had been working with him for decades, and his fans. She said that he was in a really good mood the day before his death. He had just done 3 shows in LA. He'd never been so proud of himself, so happy, and he was looking forward to the future. And then it was literally just a medication mix up. His medication reacted badly and he was gone.
Ugh, that's scary.
It's one of the saddest deaths that we've covered because it was so accidental. He wasn't taking drugs trying to get high anymore.
Right.
He just had a bad mix of painkillers and that's what it was. So Tom Petty obviously has a legacy. We're sitting here talking about him on the show. He's sold more than 50 million albums. both with the Heartbreakers and as a solo artist. He's won 4 Grammys, been part of the Traveling Wilburys with his heroes George Harrison, Bob Dylan, and Roy Orbison, and he's been on too many sold-out tours to count. He was the 2005 recipient of the Billboard Century Award, which acknowledges creative achievements of artists whose musical contributions are still ongoing. As Brian mentioned, they re-released the originally intended Wildflowers and More last year. I think that was maybe what brought Tom Petty back to the surface last year. It was everywhere for like a couple weeks in the music sphere. The Wildflowers and More. And that is the story of Tom Petty. Like we always say, that is the bite-sized Taco Bell drive-through version of Tom Petty. So if you're interested in learning more, please go do so. But good pick, guys. I don't know if it would have probably taken me a while to do Tom Petty if it had not been chosen for me to do this month. I'm not drinking anything because, fun fact, we didn't fit our recording into one night last time.
Nope.
Like we normally do, because we talked for 47 minutes about Blue Ridge Rock Fest.
I had a whole diagnosis of Blue Ridge Rock Fest, and I had to deliver the results.
So we did not get to record. So we're recording this separately, which is very strange.
Yeah. I'm drinking a Diet Snapple, like I mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Lemon flavor, which is not my favorite, but
I have water.
I'll take it. Yeah. Anyway. Thank you for listening. Please leave us a review. We love to hear your thoughts. Good Pods. What?
You can leave a review on Apple Podcast or Good Pods.
Oh, okay. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Good Pods or wherever you see a review and you're listening to the podcast and you go, hey, I think I'm going to leave a review. Go do it. Special thanks to Death of Fawn for our intro riff. You can visit our website at shewillrockyou.com. There you find our social information, our show notes, how to contact us, and our merch. Other than that, don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs.